It had started out as a harmless joke, or at least that's how it seemed to me at the time. The evening air was warm, the kind that envelops you like a cozy blanket, and in the distance, there was quiet laughter. I had no idea that the words I spoke in that fleeting moment would sweep through my life like a pebble tossed into still water and cause waves I never imagined. My husband James and I have always been incredibly close. We met in college, fell madly in love, and married 3 years later. 10 years later, we were inseparable, a couple that everyone admired. We still went on dates, had surprise picnics in the park, left each other love notes stuffed in our briefcase, and exchanged elaborate gifts just for fun. The unbreakable bond was so strong that I never thought anything could threaten it, and I never thought one careless comment could ruin everything we'd built together. It was a warm Friday evening, and we were sitting in the backyard, enjoying a quiet evening with a couple glasses of wine. The conversation was light and casual. Friends were making plans for the weekend. As the wine flowed, the mood changed. It became more intimate, playful, even a little flirtatious. James leaned closer, kissed my cheek, and whispered something vaguely in my ear. It was typical of him, part of that teasing, affectionate dynamic we always shared. When he cheekily remarked how amazing he was in bed, I laughed and parried, "Yeah, but I always thought you were a little different." The words came out on their own before I realized what I'd said. The moment they hung in the air, I wished I could take them back. James' face froze. At first I thought he was joking, that he would laugh, but the warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by something I couldn't identify. He stood up abruptly and mumbled something unintelligible. I tried to brush him off with a nervous giggle, figuring he just needed time, but when he didn't return and decided to sleep on the couch, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. The next morning I tried to apologize. I explained that it was just a stupid joke that I had said without thinking, but James wouldn't listen. He barely looked at me, grabbed his car keys, and said he needed to be alone. I told myself that this would pass. After all, we had been through so many ups and downs together. Of course, it was just a bump in the road, but the days dragged on, and instead of getting back to normal, James started coming home late. When he did, he barely spoke to me, often avoiding eye contact altogether. I felt like I was living with a stranger. The man who used to shower me with affection now seemed distant, cold, and inaccessible. I desperately wanted to make things right, to show him how much he meant to me. I cooked his favorite meals, planned surprise dates, and even wrote him a heartfelt letter, but none of it mattered. It seemed like my words opened the door to something deeper. I began to suspect that I had touched an insecurity that James had silently carried around for years. One night, after another excruciatingly quiet dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. I set my fork aside and said, "James, please talk to me. I don't understand what's going on. It was a stupid joke and I've apologized 100 times. Why are you still so angry?" My voice shook. He sat silent for a while, his face impenetrable. Finally he spoke. "You don't understand, Emily," he said quietly, resentment in his voice. "It wasn't just a comment. It was about what it meant. You said something I've always feared, something I haven't been sure of since I was a teenager. You took that fear and threw it in my face." His words crashed over me like a tidal wave. I hadn't realized James had carried that burden for so long. All these years I thought we have a strong, open relationship. I never suspected he could harbor such deep insecurities. "But James," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" He sighed, and the weariness in his voice broke my heart. "Because I didn't want you to think I wasn't that kind of person. I thought that if I didn't talk about it, it wouldn't matter. But now I can't stop thinking about it. Every time I look at you, I wonder if you always felt this way. Every time we were together, were you secretly disappointed?" Hearing those words was like a punch to the gut. I tried to comfort him, to tell him how much I loved him, but it didn't seem to matter. I could see the doubt in his eyes, and it was tearing us apart. From that moment on, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. James' insecurities permeated every corner of our lives. We started arguing about things that had never been an issue before. Small disagreements over chores or weekend plans turned into full-blown fights. The tension between us became unbearable, and our once happy marriage seemed to be crumbling before our eyes. One day, coming home from work, I saw James packing his suitcase. My heart sank. As he knelt by the bed folding clothes, I felt like I was watching someone else's life instead of my own. "What are you doing?" I asked, barely audible, trembling with fear of hearing an answer I wasn't ready for. He didn't even look up. "I'm leaving, Emily," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. Those words struck me like a blow. I need time to think. I can't live like this anymore. It was as if all the air had been let out of the room. My legs went weak and a heaviness appeared in my chest. "You're leaving because of a stupid joke?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. James stopped for a moment, stood up and looked at me. There was a mask of sadness on his face and something deeper, something more. "It wasn't just a joke," he said, still clutching his suitcase. "It was everything. The joke was just the spark that lit the fire. I've been unhappy for a long time, Emily, and I didn't even realize it until now." His words stabbed a dagger into my heart. Unhappy? How could he be unhappy? I thought we were happy. At least I thought we were. Synchronizing this story in my mind, I had always believed that our marriage was solid, that we understood each other. Now, however, it seemed to me that someone had shattered the foundation of my world. I froze, unable to move or speak, until James zipped up his suitcase. He didn't say goodbye or promise to come back. He simply walked out the door. The sound of it closing behind him was deafening. The next few days were some of the hardest of my life. I felt like I was walking through a fog, unable to think clearly or focus on anything. The world outside the window seemed to keep moving, as if nothing was happening, while I was falling apart. I went over and over in my head everything that had happened, analyzing every word I said, every moment that led up to it. I wanted so badly to go back in time, to take my words back, and undo the consequences. I tried to contact him, but he wouldn't answer. I called, I wrote. I even went to visit him once, but James was adamant. He needed space, and as much as it tore me apart, I knew I had to give him that space. As the weeks went by, I realized that my marriage might actually be over. The thought was unbearable, but I could no longer ignore it. I started seeing a therapist to help me deal with the guilt and grief that was weighing me down like an anchor. We unraveled all the layers of our relationship, and I realized that the joke, as hurtful as it was not the only reason. My therapist helped me see that a big part of the problem was James' insecurity, which he had never fully dealt with. My words, albeit unintentionally, brought that insecurity to the surface. But it wasn't just about this moment. It was about all the moments that preceded it, all the unresolved issues that we had quietly sidestepped. One evening, out of the blue, James called. Seeing his name on my phone screen made my heart beat faster. For a moment, I let myself hope that maybe he was ready to come home, that maybe we could make things right. I answered quickly, my voice barely hiding the mixture of hope and fear bubbling up inside me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Emily," he said in a somber tone. "I don't think I can go back." His words were like a punch to my very gut. I felt tears come to my eyes. "Why not? Why not?" I asked, my voice breaking. "We can get through this, James. We can fix this." His indecision hung in the air, heavy and painful. "I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what you said," he finally admitted. "It's not just about size. It's about trust. I thought you saw me as a strong, confident man, and now I think you see me as less, and I can't live with that." I tried to explain, to convince him that I didn't see him that way. I told him I loved him, that I had always loved him, but nothing could change his mind. His decision was final. A month later, the divorce papers came. Signing them was one of the most painful things I've ever done. I couldn't believe that something so insignificant, an ill-considered remark, had led to the breakup of my marriage. But as time went on, I realized it wasn't just about the joke. The joke was the tipping point, the final straw that exposed all the cracks beneath the surface. Looking back, I can see how fragile our marriage really was. What I thought was solid turned out to be weighed down by unspoken fears and unresolved issues that we never confronted. By the time we did, it was too late for a happy ending. James and I never found our way back to each other. He moved on, and eventually I did too. It wasn't easy, and the pain still lingered for a long time, but therapy helped me think things through and find a way forward. I learned some hard lessons from this experience. Words mean more than we often realize. What we say, even in moments of humor or frustration, can have a lasting impact. But more importantly, I learned the value of open and honest communication. If you hide your insecurities and ignore the cracks in your relationship, they will only deepen. Now, years later, I've rebuilt my life. The scars from that failed marriage remain, but they serve as a reminder of the lessons I've learned. I've become more careful with my words, more careful in relationships, and more willing to deal with problems face to face. While I wish things were different in my relationship with James, I've learned that sometimes even the strongest relationships aren't meant to last. Sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's broken.